Hello everyone, this is Adam, and I wanted to thank you for taking time this semester to take this course. I know it's a very stressful time for everybody. I hope you feel like it's a worthy investment of your time and money to learn more about the native cultures of this place we call Alaska. You know, it's been said, I think by the anthropologist who held this position before me, the late Alan Boris, that, quote, if you don't know your place, you don't know anything. Knowing about the histories and the politics and the cultures of the place where you are is such an important part of somebody's education, which is one of the reasons that we have GERs related to that. Now, I want you to think of Alaska for a second. Maybe even pause the video, write down a few thoughts, just like what comes to mind when you think Alaska. You might think about the beautiful forests, the wonderful fishing and hunting. You might think about different aspects of our state economy, like oil. You might think about home, if you're from here. You might think about all sorts of different things. Did you think about indigenous people, though? Maybe not. It probably depends. Probably some people did and some people didn't. And if you didn't, that's totally fine and totally okay. But I think it's something that's worth learning about, and that's what this course is all about. If you'll recall from the reading you did, and I'm assuming here that you already did the reading by Langdon and Leggett about the Anchorage cultural heritage, they kind of talk about the fact that this was written back in 2004, but at the time, there really wasn't much in Anchorage in the way of signs or statues that would sort of honor and talk about the history from a native perspective for that region. It was really focused on instead the European American history of it. And, that's not sort of confined to statues or signs. That's kind of a broader pattern we sometimes see with indigenous issues. There was a study that was done about 4 years ago, and they looked at high school curriculum and school curriculum across all of the 50 states. And what they found is that in over 50% of the time, Native American cultures were thought of, at least at the state curriculum level, were spoken about as past tense, namely they spoke about indigenous cultures prior to 1900. They also found that very often the state curriculum about Native Americans was depersonalized at both the group and individual level, meaning they often did not mention specific groups and just referred collectively to Native Americans or Alaska Natives, and then at the individual level that they very often, the vast majority of the time, did not mention a specific Native American person. It was just sort of these groups, right? So even if they're talking about a specific group like Inupiat, you weren't learning about any specific Inupiat people throughout history. And so if that was your only experience learning about indigenous peoples, which it's not, obviously that's not the only way we learn about indigenous history and the indigenous present, but if that was the only way, you might come across with a viewpoint of Native Americans or Alaska Native people as very sort of past tense, right? And as sort of very generalized. And I'd like to kind of do a little thought experiment. What if we taught European history that way, right? What if we sort of ended, when we were teaching European history in schools, we didn't teach anything past 1900, because of course nothing important happened in the 20th century in Europe. And what if we never mentioned specific Europeans, right? There's no King George or anything like that. And what if we never even mentioned specific European nations a lot of the time, right? No France, Germany, England, it's just sort of Europeans, right? That would not be very accurate. That would not be very informative. But that's sometimes how we talk about Native American cultures. And so I also want you to think, from the reading we did and the way that Aaron Leggett, who's Dena'ina Athabascan, the way he kind of talked about how it caused him to feel as a Dena'ina person, feeling like people weren't really aware of Anchorage's native history, or even that there was and is native people there. So I think whatever our views on a variety of different policy issues, I think we can all agree that our experience of living in Alaska is much, much richer, and I also think more just if we know about Alaska Native cultures, not just in the historic sense, which is what the Leggett and Langdon article was talking about, but also in the present day sense of the Native people who are over 15% of our state. William Cronin has a great quote. He says, "The past is at its best when it takes us to places that counsel and instruct, that show us who we are by showing us where we have been, that remind us of our connections to what happened here." So that's a little bit of the point of this lecture today. is I want us to talk a little bit about our place, geographically and also historically. I also want to talk a bit about our purpose for this class and also your purpose for this class, which may or may not be the same thing. And I also want to talk about the perspectives we'll take in this class. So it's kind of foundational stuff, and I know these kind of lectures can be kind of dry. These week 1 lectures are going to get a lot better as we go along, but I hope you do find this useful as sort of a way of orienting you to the class. By the way, if you haven't read the syllabus yet, please read the syllabus.